Good evening and welcome to Chasing the Facts. I'm Sam Chase, your host. With us for this show is Town Moderator Jon Kurland. Good evening, Jon. How are you?
I'm well, Sam. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much. And I've asked Jon to be our guest this evening because we have a little bit of a change in the process for town meeting this year. And there's been a little bit of controversy on that subject, so I've asked Jon in to address some of those issues and explain to the audience generally how town meeting works and what we're going to be doing this year. So, Jon, I wonder if you could start off by telling us what happened last year and the steps that you took to ensure that we had a safe venue for town meeting last year.
Sure, thank you. Well, last year, as you know, in March, things started to shut down. Our town meeting is always the last Monday in April. So we didn't have a lot of time to figure out what we were going to do. And the legislature was actually somewhat slow in responding. So we didn't get much guidance from the state legislature, at least initially. They did ultimately pass some legislation, but because the general laws don't provide for a pandemic. It's like, you know, if there's a hurricane or if there's some other problem with
natural disaster type stuff.
Yes. Right. So the legislature basically said you can continue it for 30 days. And I knew that 30 days was not going to work for us. But basically, in situations where there's no quorum, the moderator can designate the next date. So I had contacted Sue Rosa, who's the head of our health department, with Paul Cohen, Gary Persichetti, Public Works, Kathleen Canavan from Public Facilities, and we started to try to figure out what we were going to do. And it became very obvious that the senior center would not be a sufficient location for social distancing, because at that point, they're talking about 6 feet per person, social distancing, and masks. So ultimately, in discussing things with the superintendent, it became obvious, you know, Gary Persichetti basically said the space that would be best suited would be the high school gym.
In order to meet all of the requirements.
Right. We would have the social distancing. Mm-hmm. There's great ventilation in that facility, very high ceilings. And so we decided, okay, so we have to do it in the high school gym. And we did it in late June in the high school gym. We really had somewhat of a limited warrant anyways. So we have something called a consent agenda where if there are routine warrant articles, we can bundle them together and then town meeting can vote on them as one article. So we had the consent agenda, and between that and the rest of the warrant, we were able to wrap up in one evening, which was great.
And also it's unusual.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Usually the spring town meeting goes at least 2 nights, and very often it'll go 3. So.
Yes, which we're expecting this year, and possibly even 4. You know, at that time, you know, I looked into everything. There were some people who wanted us to consider virtual town meetings like Zoom, which is fraught with all kinds of logistical and practical problems. And if we have time towards the end, I can always get into that. But we decided that a virtual town meeting was beyond the capabilities of our town. Mm-hmm. So we had it in June. And
now, let me interrupt you for 1 second. So why did you have it in June and not May, for example? Was there a particular reason for that?
Well, the schools were open.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. All right.
I mean, I don't believe at that point they'd closed down the schools. Mm-hmm. But even if they weren't, we wanted to have as much lead time to figure out what was going on, because
At this point, you're plowing virgin ground. We've never done this before.
right, and we didn't know how long it would take Chelmsford Telemedia to set things up. So, and June was agreed upon by everybody, okay? At the time, Chairman Ken Lefebvre and yourself was present, and we had I have to show up under the guidelines to declare there's not a quorum. So I showed up, I declared there was not a quorum, and we continued it to the high school gym at the agreed upon date that everyone was happy with. And we got through in one night, which was just terrific. The town meeting reps were very cognizant of the health issues and not trying to make the process longer than it had to be. And then,
as I recall, the discussions were a good deal more constrained and somewhat shorter than they would have been under normal circumstances, to your point.
Well, that was another thing that I did.
People were trying to be respectful of the situation.
Well, we normally would allow 5 minutes of debate, and I reduced it to 3 minutes.
Right.
And no one had a problem with that.
Right.
You know, I checked with the town meeting reps that, you know, we'd like to do 3 minutes instead of 5. And to be honest with you, if you can't get your point across, unless it's a complex issue, within 3 minutes, you're not going to be able to make your point anyways. So
At some point, you lose the audience.
exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Or you start repeating yourself.
Right.
So we cut down on that, and then we had a special town meeting in August, if I recall, to purchase the Warren Pole property.
And that was just the one article.
Right. And you know, I had a sense that it was pretty popular to keep the open space, and I wasn't sure how many people would show up. I was hoping we would get a quorum, and we did. But we were able to use the Performing Arts Center for that very brief meeting. But even there, we didn't have a full complement of town meeting reps. But the spaces that had been earmarked for town meeting reps to sit in were not sufficient, and we did not have the social distancing that I was comfortable with. But we just pushed through on it, and I think the meeting took about 20 minutes.
Yeah, we weren't there even a half an hour, as I recall.
Yeah, so that was okay. And then we had fall town meeting, and we had it in the high school because at that time the school was shut down. And that was also one night, as I recall. So we were able to get all of that done. And the good news was, and obviously the town clerk keeps track of this and the Board of Health keeps track of this, we did not have any infections that were attributable to town meeting. So that's what happened last year.
And as I recall, and at the time I was a town meeting rep, and as I recall, the Springtown meeting, I was worried that you might not get a quorum because a lot of people were nervous and unsure about whether they should show up and so forth. But if I remember, it was a healthy, I recall it was around 100 people.
Yeah, a little over, but yes.
Okay, and then the same situation for the special in August.
Right.
With Warren Paul, I think it was, somewhere between 90 and 100. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, no, I think it might have even been a little bit more.
Yeah, so, but what that also tells you is that we have 162 town meeting reps, and you normally would expect in a normal situation to get 145 to 150 would normally show up. It does tell you that a significant number of people were not comfortable.
Oh, I got emails from people who were not happy that we were having town meeting at all.
Exactly, and I recall that. Okay, so that was a year ago, and the only, just to follow up on what you just said, as I remember, the only pushback you got was from people who didn't think we should have a town meeting at all.
Pretty much.
In that
Again,
manner.
one or two were hoping for, pushing for a virtual one,
Right.
and I basically referred them to, our town IT guy, Ted Lutter, and there were some communications, but Ted made it very clear to me throughout, because even in October we were trying to explore that possibility, logistically, it's extremely problematic. The training for town meeting reps is pretty intensive. I don't know how many people out there had difficulty learning how to do Zoom.
Well, that's certainly a valid point, and also in consideration of the fact that, you know, we vote by electronic means. It's not just a raise the hand or raise the card. You have to go through all that technology too to record people's votes virtually. I can imagine.
I mean, I spoke to the moderator in Lexington, who did a virtual. And one of their selectmen is a very talented
IT guy.
Yeah, I mean, and he basically created a portal because they use the same electronic voting system that we do. So he created a portal, but even then, they had, I think, each town meeting rep had to do like 3 training sessions, and voting was problematic. They had 5 help desks. So people would call in and say, you know, what do I do? And we just don't have that capability.
No.
And even so, there were people who would call the help desk and say, my vote wasn't recorded. And because they had the electronics, so they had a way of doing this. And the reps had to basically use 2 browsers, one for town meeting and one for voting. And that's the way they set it up. And voting on the short end for them was 5 minutes to generate a vote. In our town meeting, it's 35 seconds. So that's a huge difference, especially, you know, when you have 20 or 30 or 40 warrant articles.
So we weren't really, we weren't in a position to implement a technological solution for virtual and so forth. But what I'm getting out of this conversation is that you really did your due diligence. You exhausted virtually every possibility. You talked to all the right people, both in the town and outside of the town, to try to get proper guidance, and that's how you arrived at your decision. So now, let's fast forward to this year. We've got what looks like a little better situation, perhaps, with regard to the COVID. We have the vaccines, people are getting vaccinated and so forth. And it appears that some of the restrictive practices have been lifted to a degree. But let's pick it up from there. You're basically faced with the same situation this year that you had last year, the only difference really being that we have a year's worth of sort of experience behind us to help guide our decision.
Right.
So take it from there.
So this year, the first person I talked to was Sue Rosa, head of the health department. And she indicated to me the senior center was not feasible again. Now, the Warren article, which
for the same reasons that...
Oh, yeah, exactly. We social distancing, the space was too small, and the number of people. So, you know, after I spoke to her, you know, we were back to, you know, again, the best location was the high school gym. So, you know, we spoke to Chelmsford Telemedia, and I did not realize this, but it takes Chelmsford Telemedia about 3.5 days to set up the high school gym for town meeting. And not only because they bring in the Wi-Fi, they have all their equipment, but they also set up the speakers, the sound system for everybody, the screens so that everybody has, you know, I have a screen, the town council has a screen, the town clerk has a screen, there's screens for the FinCom and the select board, and I've learned a new term that they call it flying, where they have to elevate the cables, and and so we're talking about they're also shorthanded,
yes, right.
Personnel-wise.
Telemedia is shorthanded. That's
right.
Correct.
So so I again talked to everybody that I could, and I appeared about 2.5.
And the school department as well indicated that you really, and you can get into this a little bit more in detail later, but at that point, the school department had indicated to you that
They were going back to full.
that you were going back to a full classroom.
Right.
And so on and so forth. So basically, the availability of the gym is at the end of the school year.
Yeah, I also think it's important for people to understand that the warrant is served and published, and it's got a date, a time, and a location. And you're sort of married to whatever the warrant says.
Correct.
I'm not involved in creating the warrant. So the warrant said April 26, 7:30 p.m. at the senior center.
Right.
Okay. You cannot basically have everybody go to the senior center and then say, okay, we're going to go to the high school. You just can't do it because people will show up late, and if they don't know you're moving to the high school, you know, what do they do? So,
Plus, the high school's not available on April 26th.
it wasn't at the time. But
Yeah, right.
again, you know, there have been some people who said, do it at the high school gym on the 26th, and we
Right.
can't. So I contacted Dr. Lang and asked him, you know, well, before that, I went to the, during the open session at a select board meeting.
Correct.
2.5 weeks ago, whatever, and I suggested June 21st as the first date, because I knew school would be over. I didn't know all about the length of time that it would take to
Set up the hall.
set everything,
Yeah.
you know, because I get there, it's all set up.
Right.
Okay. And I got some pushback saying, well, if we do it on the 21st, if it's 3 days, then it's the 28th, and you know, people will be on vacation that week. Okay. So I talked to Dr. Lang and I said, you know, what's the earliest date we can have it? And he says, well, school is in session. The last day of school is half day on the 16th. So I said, so we're back to the 21st. He says, well, he says, the 14th, the 15th, and the 16th are exams. So they don't need to use the gym because they use the gym a lot. On April 26th, as it turns out, boys volleyball has their tryouts, and then their whole season, it goes from there. And they use the gym for a myriad of purposes, including as a flex room for meetings and events, but also if there's inclement weather, athletes can do their practices in the gym as opposed to outside in bad weather. So, so he says, well, so I'm back to the 21st, but people are not happy about that. And I said, so there's no way we can do it earlier. And he says, well, you know, because everybody's going to be in exams, we don't need to use the gym 14th, 15th, and 16th. So that would give Chelmsford Telemedia the 3 days
Right.
that they need to set up, and we could do it on the 17th, which is a Thursday, because we always meet on Mondays and
So
Thursdays.
you bought 4 extra days,
Right.
and that gives you a little bit more wiggle room toward the end, because one thing the viewers need to know is that the town's business has to be completed by June 30th, which is the end of the fiscal year. You can't go beyond that. So,
Right.
So
And-
that's the window that you're operating within.
And you know, some of the people who were pushing for us to have it in April or May, they wanted us to cut the warrant down. There are 2 citizens petitions, and you know, these are people who want town meeting to address a particular concern that they have. And I made it very clear that I really was not in favor of getting rid of, you know, citizens petitions, because they've waited time to do this, and then they would have to wait another 6 months to do it in October. And you know,
Well, the
and
bottom line is that the town meeting reps don't determine the legislative agenda.
right,
They don't.
exactly.
Okay?
So, but the other thing is, I have yet to hear a rationale why people want to have town meeting in April or May. First of all, it would disrupt the schools, because if we had to do it in the high school, so we can't. So really, the very first available date that we have is April 17th. And
June
I'm
17th.
sorry,
Yeah,
June
that's okay.
17th.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, to me, there is nothing more important than the health and welfare of anybody in attendance at town meeting, whether they're town meeting reps, whether they're the administration or the school department, or citizens who want to advance whatever articles or whatever, anybody, the Chelmsford telemedia people. So I have yet to hear a reason why they want to move town meeting in April or May. It just, it defies logic to me, because to me, the most important thing is public health. And to be honest with you, I've gotten, I sent a letter out on Monday, Monday or Tuesday, I forget. But
Today is Wednesday.
Today's Wednesday. I sent it out on Monday.
Okay.
And I normally do a letter before town meeting anyways to explain to the town meeting reps about the consent agenda, what the articles are that we plan on putting on the consent agenda so they can be aware of it well in advance, and also to reiterate the basic rules of protocol at town meetings. And this year we're going to have, at least this next session, we're going to have 19 new town meeting reps who have never been town meeting reps before. So, you know, I want to make sure that they're aware of this. So I sent a letter this time because there has been some blowback in certain people that they want people to show up on the 26th so they can decide the date of town meeting, which is not appropriate anyways. But if they're trying to recruit people to go to town meeting for the sole purpose of trying to suggest another date, if it's not June 17th and if it's not at the high school, we cannot legally comply with the CDC and state safety guidelines. Moreover, right now, we are trending the wrong way. We are now a red high-risk community in the state, and we have been for about 3 or 4 days now. So, you know, if people think that with all the vaccinations, and you and I both have been vaccinated.
And let me interrupt you for 1 second, because we're talking about COVID protocols and social distancing, and there may be people out there that, you know, think that things are getting better. Don't misunderstand me, and I certainly don't want to be a negative Nelly here, but just for the benefit of the audience here, you're seeing John and I now, we're not wearing masks. However, the COVID protocol is still being observed in this studio. There are only 3 of us in the studio.
Right.
Normally we have floor camera people. They are not here because of the proximity. There is the guest, John, the interviewer, me, and Vilu Tari, who manages the production from the production booth, which is a good 55 feet away from us. We are socially distanced at a table. We are 8.5 feet apart. John and I have both been fully vaccinated. So this is a safe situation here, okay? But normally we would have more people in the studio, and telemedia is still not allowing that. So I just say that so that the audience gets a flavor that we're all conscious of this situation, and we're still observing the protocols, even though advances have been made in mitigating the disease itself.
Right,
So,
and you know, I'm really hopeful that by October, there will be enough people who have been vaccinated. You know, you hear people
I hope so.
talk about herd
Sure.
immunity or things like that. But, you know, this vaccine is like a flu vaccine. You know, you can get your flu vaccine and you can get the flu, you just won't get it as
correct,
bad.
and they're not sure even at this point how long the protection lasts. So
That's true.
So that we have to wait and see how that turns out. So you did get as I recall, because I watched the last select board meeting, you did get what I thought was fairly strident pushback from one of the town meeting reps, and then you also got a letter from another one who was questioning your decision. So did you in any way respond to those inquiries that you got from the town meeting reps?
Well, I mean, I was responding during the select board meeting.
Okay.
I mean, I made my position, I thought, pretty clear. With respect to the email, yes, I did respond,
Okay,
as
good.
I always do.
Good, good.
And you know, I got a letter, an email with a letter last week from one of the town meeting reps who was at that select board meeting, or, I mean, virtually, and I responded to that as well.
Okay.
So, anybody who sends me an email, I respond to. I was gratified that I got close to half a dozen emails today because I sent out that letter that I was talking to you about.
On Monday.
On Monday,
Right.
which I explained, here's what I've been doing, here's the rationale. I'm not going to discourage anyone from showing up at town meeting. And I said, if you want to do that, that's up to you. But the reality is that
Showing up on the 26th.
on the 26th
Right.
of April, they can show up, but we can't legally hold the meeting there, even if we had a quorum of 82. So we would have to continue it to the June 17th date, since that's the first available date we have that we can use the gym and Chelmsford Telemedia can be all set up and everything. So I sent that letter out, and I've gotten about a half a dozen emails and a telephone call expressing support, and they understand that you can argue that the charter says this and the charter says that, and you were on the charter review committee, so the charter never anticipated a pandemic, right? There's nothing in there about that. So to me, public health is of paramount importance.
And just a technical point, you're not violating the charter anyway because you are going to be at the senior center
oh yeah,
on April 26th, and you will discharge your duties as moderator pursuant to the state law and the charter requirements. So there is no legal conflict with the charter.
right. Well, I mean, they were trying to argue that there was.
I understand. Right.
But so it's just sad because, again, I don't know why they're doing this, and I still, it's a curiosity because last year I did the same thing, and nobody really complained, other than the one or two people who thought we should try to do virtual.
Or not hold a meeting at all.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
you did get some of that.
right, but I mean, we really didn't have a choice.
Oh, of course not. No, you
we had to discharge our. We had to do a budget. We could go to a 1/12 budget, which is not really a good way
No.
to plan.
And that's what, as I recall, looking at the news media at the time in that whole time frame, March, April, and so forth, that's exactly what many towns were doing, and we were talking about it. In fact, I think Lowell actually did that, if I recall. So a number of towns addressed it in different ways. Going back to the situation of what you've heard over the last day or two from folks that have contacted you. So so everybody that you've heard from so far has said, thank you very much, appreciate, you making this. Right.
Since I appeared the other day in front of the select board,
right.
other than that, those two communications that I had,
Right.
and what can I say? We try to do the best that we can. I've tried to follow the science. I've tried to explore different opportunities that might be available townwide for facilities. And there's, really, the June 17th date was not a date I picked. It was the only first available date that was available. It was, so we'll see what happens. But I think the people who understand that things are still not back to normal.
No.
And that when you're in an enclosed space for 3.5 hours, perhaps twice a week, there is a risk. And I'm trying to minimize that risk. And that's what I'm trying.
And I think you've done an excellent job. I'm convinced and that you've done yeoman service on due diligence. And we also know that the towns around us are doing the same things. They're pushing their meetings out in ways. So this is not something that's just unique to Chelmsford. You've got 30 seconds. Is there anything you want to say to the audience now in 20 seconds?
Well, just that I'm grateful for the people who have run for town meeting rep. and for all the offices, to be honest with you. It's, you know, it's sometimes very difficult to get enough town meeting reps to run.
Yep.
And it looks like we're pretty full this time. I think Precinct 4 is
Yep.
short one. And so thank you all, and I'm looking forward to all of you